Good evening and welcome to another episode. I think it's the 13th of Highbury Matters. So every week when I have this, I say I've got a fantastic guest, and every time they overperform. Tonight is no different. I've got Mike from the Gooners podcast. Looking forward to that. And we're going to talk about the 1988-9 season and 1989-90. Oh, that was a mouthful, wasn't it? Season. Right, I think I can hear the studs on the concrete. I think the teams are coming out. Let's go. Good evening, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing lovely. I love that introduction. Lots of memories, lots of warm and sad memories, especially seeing those terraces. That always gets me. It always gets me. But Melvyn, it's great to join you. I'm loving the topic that you brought me on for, and shockingly to most people, I have a little bit of background in it. So,
I mean, the years we chose is a bit of a coincidence. I mean, it's just perfect because these are the 2-3 seasons that you were over here from America. Is that true?
Yeah, I was here for 2 seasons, the 88-89 and the 99 and the 89-91. And I'd say my consumption of those 2 seasons would be relatively unique, considering how I came into those seasons, why I ended up at Highbury those seasons, and ultimately what ended up happening those seasons for the brand new Yank football supporter. So I'm sure we'll dig into all that. But
well, let's start with that, shall we? There's no warm up here, Mike. No 5-minute warm up here. You've got to go straight into the game.
I'm going to pull a hamstring or something like that if I don't do the proper warm up.
No, that's allowed. Go easy. Why did you first support the Arsenal? Why was it Arsenal for you? And when was your first game?
I wish I knew exactly which one it was. I know the general time frame, but basically I was 15 in 1988, and my family took us over to England for my stepfather's work, and I didn't want to go. I thought, Virginia was as good as it was ever going to get for me, and what else could there possibly be out there? And that's just to say I was an idiot. I didn't know any better, and little did I know what was to come. But once we were there, we arrived in early August. In fact, I remember, I think it was like 2 days after we got there, I think one of the princes was born, 8/8/88. And everyone was going nuts. And I wanted to assimilate into the new culture. If I was going to live there, I wanted to kind of truly live there and not just do live there by half measures and kind of try to have an American lifestyle in London. I wanted to fit in and sink in. So one of the first things I did after kind of learning the tube and figuring out transportation, how to get around, was decide to follow a football club. So I have heard so many stories over the years about why people have picked their football clubs, mostly, of course, Arsenal, since that's the community I'm in. And it's everything from FIFA or Bergkamp or my dad and my, 7 generations or any of these things. For me, I looked at the tube map and said, what is the closest team to where I live? And I'm going to try that first. And fortunately, I was wrong about it, because the first tube stop that I saw that was in central London where I lived that had the name of a football team in it was Tottenham Court Road. And so I do a little bit of research. I'm like, okay, I know there's a Tottenham Court Road is nearby, relatively nearby. I'll go to that. And I very quickly learned that Tottenham don't play anywhere close to Tottenham Court Road. And so I said, okay, well, that's out. The next one was, because I lived on the Piccadilly line, was Arsenal. There's a tube stop, maybe 15, 16 stops away, but there's a tube stop called Arsenal, and that's where the club plays. So I'll give that a try. We'll see. That'll be the first one I go to. So I grab a mate of mine from the American school. It was probably early September. I want to say, I usually try to say that the first game I went to was like mid-September. So that probably had been like the Southampton game. And we just go to tube stop, walk off the tube through those long, long tunnels at Arsenal Tube, and just followed people. I don't remember whether I spilled onto Highbury Hill, or I think we ended up going down Avenel Road to Gillespie, or Gillespie to Avenel, and just poured into the first gate that, the first turnstiles we saw, which were the turnstiles into the North Bank terraces. And my first game, I just was blown away, and there was never any other. That wasn't the first of many, and then I came back to it. That was it. The smell, the onions, the burgers, the people selling skull. I mean, just the whole experience, which is very similar to the experience you get on game day now in the same location. You just have to make a right instead of a left.
That's true.
But yeah, it was that for me. And for the next 2 years, I pretty regularly was sitting. We would get to those North Bank terraces about an hour and a half early to claim the spot that we liked. Usually would have a pint of some cheap liquor, like some whiskey or scotch or something. I would get a Diet Coke and a program in the stadium and just sit there for an hour and a half, or eventually stand there, killing time until 3 p.m. But it was Arsenal for me, and they could have been awful that year. They could have, but I just would have loved the experience and the environment and how different it was from everything I was used to as a teenage American sports fan. So,
did you tell all your friends, Mike, when you got back to the States a year or so later, when you saw that film Fever Pitch? I was part of that. That was me.
Well, I got to tell you, I didn't see the proper Fever Pitch for many, many years after that. I mean, it was probably the first time I saw that movie was the early 2000s or maybe even like the mid noughts. Well after the ridiculously, I never watched the American baseball Fever Pitch, but I became aware from that movie that it wasn't the original Fever Pitch and that there was one about Arsenal. And I can't stand to watch the Jimmy Fallon, Drew Barrymore version of it, but my kids and my wife and I have watched Fever Pitch probably 40 times now. And every time I tell them, as though they have never heard it before, that I lived this. I remember that game that he was, that they're talking about, where they're all getting pushed around and he brings his girlfriend for the first. I mean, I remember that stuff. Not in minute detail, but yeah, I lived that season. And spoiler alert, it turned out pretty well.
Yeah, you spoiled the whole thing. I'll speak to you next week.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, it's over. Sorry.
Though you started in that season, did you straight away, because it was different for me, I went when I was very young, so everything for me was so fantastic, and I just got straight away I was just starting to play football, and I had my favourite straight away. I tried to be like a couple of footballers that played for Arsenal. Was there anyone you looked at 15, 16 going, you know what, he's my idol, or was it just the whole team for you?
That's a great question. Where we sat on the where we stood on the North Bank was very close to the pitch. I mean, one of the things in American sports is, that you don't get to pick where you sit, or you don't just get to walk in and choose a seat. There's no general seating there. You buy a ticket, and the ones closer to the action, whether it's American football, hockey, basketball, whatever it is, you pay more for. And so as a kid who had been to a handful of sporting events, I mean, my dad was not much to like to go to sporting events, but he took me to, a couple, and we were always really far away. So I was just addicted by how close I was able to get if I got there early enough. We'd probably be at the second barrier, just off behind the goal to the left if you were facing the pitch. So when we would score a goal on that North Bank goal, I mean, the celebrations were right in front of you, the goals were right in front of you. So I naturally gravitated to the attacking players. And, you know, it tickles me to say this, given, you know, my current relationship with him, but Smudger and probably Paul Merson, because of just the quantity of goals they scored and the fact that their names were always on the score sheet that year, were my initial idols. But as I started to kind of understand the game more and watch it more, I mean, when someone asks me who my favorite Arsenal player is of all time now, there's only one answer, and it's David Rocastle. But, you know, to say that he, you know, caught my eye from the beginning and I was like, that guy's son, I didn't have the aptitude or the nous for the game at that point. I just liked the guys that were constantly scoring in front of us and winning the games for us. And that was Alan and Paul Merson.
Did you go to any away games when you were over here for those couple of seasons?
One. I went to one away game in 2 seasons. I never really, you know, as much as I became a fixture on the North Bank and I enjoyed going to the games, I didn't really have it all figured out. Like I didn't know how to follow the team away or how to get tickets to that. I didn't know how to. I didn't think to go to Highbury after the Anfield game and go to parades and stuff. I really kind of regret not being a little bit more astute in those areas. But the one away game I went to was in March of 1990. It was away to QPR at Loftus Road. I remember going into the pub. I was too young to get a drink, and I don't think that I actually tried that day. But that was the one that I went to, and we lost 2-0 to, you know, a goal scored by a pseudo American guy, Roy Wegerle.
Oh, I remember him. Canadian, wasn't he?
Was he Canadian? Yeah, maybe. I know he was either American or Canadian, but like also had British descent, and he was, you know, among the beginning of American or North American players playing over there, along with Harks and a few others. But like, that was the one I went to, and again, that's another regret. I would have loved to have followed the team home and away, but for a 15 or 16-year-old who I didn't know any other Gooners at that point, other than the one person that would go with me to these games. And that one person would rotate between about 2 or 3 different classmates of mine. But if they didn't go, I couldn't go. And I didn't, you know, we never really socialized. I mean, in those days, the men and women on the terraces would not have really warmed up, I don't think, too much to, you know, some 15-year-old Yank taking up a spot on the terraces. I mean, it was a different time then. I feel very much different about it now, but I certainly wasn't confident enough to try to, you know, fit in with the crew. I liked being there kind of as a visitor and as an observer, but as one who really became invested in it.
Marcus saying about the fry nut smell of the onions and stuff like that. It does. I remember going, but I remember the worst thing was around about that time, Mike, the burgers. I didn't have burgers there. I didn't.
Oh, it was mad cow disease.
Yeah. That's. I mean, some people reckon I did eat them. What I've been saying recently, but they didn't fry the burgers or grill them. They bloody boiled them, and they used to open the top. Yeah. And if you were walking past while they're opening the top, you nearly fainted. Even if you were hungry, like Marcus, you still nearly fainted. It was a strange smell, put it that way.
To this day, 30 years later, I am still not permitted to donate blood here in the United States because they're like, if one of the things that does, you know, that excludes you, there are certain diseases, drug use, none of that excludes me, but because I don't do it. But but living in London or living in England, like in the 1980s and early 90s, they don't take any chances. So like, I mean, I think most people would say that I clearly exhibit signs of mad cow disease or mad something disease, but no, it's weird. But I that smell just, and it all came back to me a few years ago when I started going to games, and I would stay in the Highbury area, and I would make sure to get up early enough so that the crowds on the streets weren't that strong, but that you could have the first burger once they opened, or just smell that. And there may be, you know, if you're dissecting the 100% of what that aroma is, I mean, there might be 1 or 2% urine in the aroma, not in the burgers, But whatever the combination of things is, it's Arsenal. That's what Arsenal smell like to me.
For me, Mike, it was that, and also once you get into the ground, it was people used to smoke.
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
And not only did they smoke cigarettes, there was quite a few people when I was a bit older and sit with dementias, if you like. People were smoking cigars. My uncle used to smoke a cigar, and that smelled like in my brains forever.
Well, you'd see, there would just be, especially for whatever reason, I guess maybe because it was undercover, I'd look over my shoulder towards the back of the terraces, and there was just like smoke rising from the back of the terraces. It's just one of those things you associated.
Yeah, of course. And another thing you could smell if someone near you, I used to do it as well, so obviously I smelled it in, was the monkey nuts, peanuts. The smell of that when people, the old people just crack it open and you eat it, and like you can't eat one, you've got to eat a dozen or more.
Yeah.
And the smell of that as well is something that I associate with Highbury. Listen, you can eat peanuts wherever you like, but that is for me was another thing: the smoke, the hamburgers, the onions, the peanuts.
It's weird. I've clearly eaten a lot of hamburgers over the course of my life, but I rarely ask for onions on them. But whenever I got one outside of Highbury, it had to be, because that was part of the deal.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I went to quite a few games when I was younger. So I went to other grounds, and we're all biased, let's face it. But I've said this many times before, just because you're biased in something doesn't mean you're wrong. And I used to look at all the other grounds I went to and think Highbury special. Even though I was 15 to 20, 25, I used to go Highbury special. Just walking up those steps, they were solid concrete steps. They weren't made of wood. I've been to a lot of grounds they were wooden, right? But Highbury has a feel about it. Yeah, it's my club, so I'm going to have an extra feel about it. But it was so special for me. Have you got any special other memories apart from just the games? Anything Highbury that you used to go, wow?
Well, I mean, in the specific games, I mean, there were a few landmark events that occurred while I was there. I mean, if we're going to kind of go through the season, I'm sure we'll hit on them.
Yeah.
But the second year I was there, I remember one of the things, and I'm not just saying this because he's become a friend of ours, but one of the things I would do before every game is read the program from cover to cover. And I still have up in Virginia at the house in my kind of safe box, I have about 20 programs from that year, and every single one of them. I mean, I had an hour and a half to kill. We got there 1:30 as soon as the turnstiles open, because I like to be in the same spot. And then there was nothing to do. I mean, you can't. There was no internet. They weren't doing any in stadium entertainment. I wasn't I wasn't hanging out on the concourse talking to people. I mean, it was just I was in my slot, sitting down, saving the spot, and reading the program, and every word of it. And when I would get to the youth team section, it was, I mean, the number of goals that were being scored by this kid were incredible. And the
can I say who it was first? Was it Kevin Campbell?
Of course it was Kevin Campbell. I mean, there was one other it could have been. I think Andy Gray might have been doing the same thing. But Kevin Campbell, the score of the game would be 3-2 or 4-2, and it was Campbell 3, and then Ampadu, Kwame's dad, or Ethan's dad, Kwame. And it was the same couple of names most of the time, but Kevin Campbell was always in there. And so to me, it was very exciting when I finally saw. I mean, you never saw a youth player on the bench, because there was one, maybe two subs. There was a 12 and a 14, wow. And so they were almost always the same 14 in some combination. When you saw a new name come in, it was pretty significant. And I remember when Campbell started showing up on the bench and ultimately makes his home debut against Nottingham Forest, and I believe scores a goal in that game past Des Walker, and just, I mean, goes to celebrate with a steward in the right at the bottom of the North Bank. It was the opposite side, but like, I remember that because of what it meant to me at the time. And so now that I've been fortunate enough to become friends with him, as many of us have been, because he's a friend to all supporters, You know, I've reenacted that goal for him from the pitch in the Highbury Stadium. We joke about it all the time, but so that's a memory. And you know, April 15th, 1989, Newcastle will always be a burnt-in memory to me because of what happened that day. But I don't want to steer your
no, not at all.
Agenda here.
No, what you tell me? What happened to the Newcastle game? I'm showing my ignorance now.
Well, April 15th, 1989 was the day of Hillsborough.
And, you're right, Newcastle. Sorry, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
And
I want to talk about that. Sorry, we are going to talk about.
Yeah, that. So let's keep that in order. But that's one of the ones that
when you talk about Kevin Campbell, all I can remember, I used to read the programs before that as well, the seasons before. Not because I had plenty of time. I have to admit, Mike, in some seasons I was reading it during the game. The games are so dire. You know, seriously, it was that bad. But I saw this kid, Kevin Campbell. There was no internet, as you say. You didn't know anything about him. You just saw this kid was knocking in goals for fun. And when he came, I might have come on a sub. I'm not sure. I remember him running on the pitch. I don't know if it was sub, because I used to sit right as the players were coming out, just above.
Yeah.
And I looked and I thought, how old is he supposed to be? He did not look his age. He looked like older, a 28-year-old.
Right? Yeah. I mean, he had.
Are you sure? Have they got the figures here wrong?
So Sophie likes to tell stories about how all of his teammates would always talk about his thighs and how ridiculously huge they were. And if you watch the '89 movie, Amy Lawrence and Lee Dixon's '89 movie, there's a scene where the back four, when they've got Dixon and Boldy and Winterburn and
Adams.
And how did I
forget him?
Yeah, no, they had the four of them all sitting, I guess, playing cards at a table, and they were talking about how George Graham would have, essentially to punish Steve Bold, they would have him do, one-on-ones with Campbell, who at the time was a youth team player, and that was like a punishment because Campbell would just run him and run him and run him. So.
Look who's joined us in the chat.
James is in. No, it's not a tape delay. It's just I'm 5 hours behind UK time. But and I don't know what Jaywick is, so I'm missing the joke there.
Jaywick Sands. It's a place in England.
Oh, okay.
Gaines.
No, this is home for me.
Neil.
Yeah, and James dad was smoking you out of the East End Upper.
Oh, fantastic.
No, but it is, I mean, Highbury, what I didn't have the opportunity to do while I was there was sample a lot of stadiums, just Highbury and Loftus Road. And as recently as 2 Saturdays ago, I was at Loftus Road because I still have an affinity for that place as kind of one of your old style football stadiums. And, if I'm in London and there's a game at QPR and there's no games at Arsenal or no games anywhere else that I can or want to go to, I always try to head there just for old time's sake. And, look up in that away section and think of myself in there watching us lose. But I also have now been to a lot of the older style stadiums, Selhurst Park, Craven Cottage,
Everton.
I've been to Goodison once, thankfully not for an Arsenal match, but I've been to a number of different stadiums. I've even been to, the new Den isn't the old Den, but I've been to places now, and I really like the old fashioned. I don't love the thin turnstiles. I've had a few turnstiles that someone
You're
had
right now, Mike. You
push me through.
You're in shape now, mate. You're in.
I'm working on that. I'm going to be turnstile proof soon, but I mean, I love the old stadiums. The Emirates to me is just, it's soulless as a building. We're putting the soul into it now, which is a completely different show. But I mean, so now I love the Emirates because of the people and the atmosphere now, not the stadium itself. But those old stadiums bring their own atmosphere sometimes. And it's just been to Charlton's, the Valley. I mean, there's just so many of them. And that's why I love, when I'm over, people are like, why are you going to QPR and Swansea? Like who cares? And I'm like, I'm not going there for the QPR or Swansea. I'm going there for football at a stadium that brings back the old memories of Highbury, basically, because I can't watch football at Highbury anymore.
And you can actually, even for just going to these grounds, you can actually feel their history as well to a degree.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah,
QPR,
it speaks to you. It sounds
yeah,
ridiculous, but I mean, there's
it does.
you know
It does.
the only thing that they have anything remotely like that in America are the really, really, truly old baseball stadiums. And you have to like baseball to even care about that. But, Wrigley Field and Fenway Park in Chicago and Boston, those are places that have been around for more than 100 years, that have had historical things happen. And they're relatively close to the same shape that they were in back then. And they've been maintained that way. Everything else is new and and brand new. But there's nothing else like it. And I can't even compare those things to going to these old stadiums. So.
I mean, going back years, there was, as I say, no internet, and it wasn't like it is now, where we're going to buy every player and there's all this going on. But there was a player at QPR who was, in my opinion, one of the finest footballers ever, Rodney Marsh.
Yeah.
He was out. He just had everything. He was an entertainer.
He's a pundit now, and not necessarily my favorite one, but as a player, I could.
No, he was great footballer. And there was a rumour in the Evening Standard, a London paper, that we were going to buy him. And I thought Christmas had come early. Obviously, it didn't happen. But that was the player. If you could have said to me, money was never an object because transfers aren't what they are like now.
Right.
There's one player that could improve the Arsenal. What could it be? And I'd say Rodney Marsh. We ain't going to get him, are we? It was like when we signed Bergkamp.
Yeah.
How did we sign Bergkamp? I still don't believe we actually signed him. Because I saw, but I've seen, I knew about.
Melvyn, I'm here to tell you that it is actually true that we did.
It's true, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to wake up in a minute. Is that right?
You've been waiting for your confirmation. It is now given to you.
I want the confirmation by email, please, Mike. If you don't mind. Right now,
sorry, I don't have emails. I can give it to you by CFAX if you'd like.
Oh, so yeah, no,
which is ultimately how I learned of most of our away results was on CFAX. I mean, I would just keep watching it, hoping that it wasn't going to change when we were up 1-0. And I mean, the games weren't, and to me, the fact that they haven't resolved this, it's minimized, but it's not resolved 30 some odd years later, that you still can't see the 3 p.m. games if you're not, it's absurd. But yeah, I mean, I didn't watch a tremendous amount of Arsenal on television while I was there, because the games weren't generally on as far as I knew. But that's why there was this desire to just go and be part of it.
Right, let's dwell into this season. Then this is 1988-9 season. I put my glasses on because I can't read my own writing. Right, I don't know where. I
thought we were doing this without notes.
I can't remember when we came into the league, Mike. I'm cheating again. In the FA Cup, West Ham beat us in the 3rd round, and Liverpool beat us in the 4th round. And Liverpool were the team then. They were a great team, and they did it for years before that. They just churned out title after title. They were even in their deepest days, they were probably 3rd or 2nd in the league. I remember the first game of the season. I remember this. We played away to Wimbledon. We beat them 5-1. I think Smudger got a hat trick. And listen, first game of the season, you're thinking, oh, that's brilliant. Looking good. Not really sure, but yeah, we're happy with that. And then I went to this game, Spurs away 3-2. We beat them. You know what the crowd was?
Something like, I don't know, like 32,500.
Oh, you know. Yes, 32,000.
I'm just guessing, but I'm thinking it's 32,621.
Yeah. Anyway, we beat them, and if I remember, I know that Marwood, Smith, and Winterburn scored. I've seen it on the box a few times, and I think Gascoigne's played that day and scored against us with his boot off. He lost his boot and still scored. I remember that.
There were some, again, not knowing that much about the entirety of the game itself. Obviously I learned Arsenal first, but I would start to pick up, especially through just seeing the results and whose names kept appearing on there. There were a few special players, and I knew Liverpool, even though they didn't particularly have a strong start to the season. I knew they were the best team in the world, or in the in our world anyway at the time. And there was something about Gascoigne and Lineker they were constantly scoring goals in bunches. And I did not have at that point the knowledge of the rivalry with Spurs. It for some reason it did not permeate into my awareness, nor did the historical association of Spurs with Judaism, which had that permeated, I fear could have led me to be gravitating.
You've had a sad life, Mike. Let's face it.
No, I mean, look, there
sliding doors.
Someone wanted me to not be a Spurs fan because the Tottenham Court Road thing and the Jewish supporter thing, like had either one of those things turned out differently and I latched onto them, I'd be a miserable old you know what right now. So good things happen for a reason, I've always been told. But I believe in that as well. So having gone to a couple of Spurs games, I didn't realize that those were North London derbies with incredible history and times at stake. I just enjoyed the games for what they were, kind of at the time. And it wasn't until later that I realized some of these things that obviously are just part of your normal understanding and psyche of the game now.
What about you were 15? You say you're obviously at school or college or something.
I was
about it where you were about your Arsenal.
I went to the American high school in London in St. John's Wood. So my general day-to-day friends and people I associated with were either Americans or international students. Football was a big deal there. I mean, I would wear my Arsenal kit to school all the time. I've got pictures from the yearbook, and then almost all of them I'm wearing, red or yellow JVC. There were a lot of people who were into football. I mean, a lot of families were there because of football. One of my classmates who I'm still close with today was an aspiring journalist who was, just starting to learn his trade, named Gab Marcotti. And we played on.
He's very good, actually.
Yeah, and we played on the same. It was called soccer, so forgive me, but we played on the same, varsity soccer team for the American School of London in 1990. But so yes, football was discussed. You had your Liverpool fans, you had your United fans. There were rivalries, but for whatever reason, I don't remember there being any Tottenham fans at the school.
Yeah, funny, strange. Right now, then, also games that stick out. I don't remember them. If you sat me down and go, right, that season, obviously there's a couple of games that I do remember, but there's also games that you think, were they that season or were they round about that season? And one of them was we played away at Man United. We drew 1-1, and we were playing well, and we obviously didn't have a great history at United, great record there, but Adam scored both goals. He put us 1-0 up and then sliced one into his own net. But, we're thinking, can we beat United at Old Trafford, which didn't happen a lot in those days. And as it happened, it didn't happen then. But at least
they weren't particularly good at that exact moment in time. I think that was the period of time, wasn't it, where Alex Ferguson had just come on and he was actually struggling?
True, but we'll talk about how they got later on, how they did better. Now, a game that I thought, not to win the league, I thought this game showed us that we're a very good team, because I still fancied, though Liverpool were well behind us, I fancied that we are a good team. We beat Forest away 4-1, and we had Brian Marwood scored one from his own halfway line. He got the ball, ran. It was a breakaway. They had the corner. We broke away and won and scored. That was brilliant. And also we got another goal that half, a typical Arsenal goal. Steve Bold at the near post, flicking it back, and I think it was Adams heading it on to make it, I think, 3-0 or whatever.
One of my best friends was a Forest fan, and it just seems so niche now to be Forest fans. But again, I mean, I'm sure most of the people who are watching this know what Nottingham Forest used to be. But they were always a threat. So beating them anywhere was
definitely.
Especially for a team that hadn't won anything significant, other than a couple FA Cups and League Cups in 18 years. So, being an away match that, again, I don't have the personal memory of living that, but
that was on television, that game, Mike. That was live. I think it might have been that's probably a Sunday afternoon game, because you didn't get a lot of other games apart from Sunday afternoon live. So it was probably that game Sunday. I remember watching it live on the box. Right, I'll tell you what, you talk about Alan Smith. He scored 23 league goals that season. 23. It's amazing. Merce got 10. Marwood got 9. Thomas got 7. And Rocky got 6. We got 73 goals that season. That's nearly two a game. Yeah. It's really, really good.
Yeah. I mean, it was just always Alan Smith. I mean, with his head, with his feet. I mean, it was just... I mean, clearly he didn't score every game, but it felt like he did. And
how many did he make, Mike, as well?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was the kind of striker. He was the kind of striker that, I mean, you could say he was very similar to Olivier Giroud, but better, but better in the context of his time. But he played in a similar way where he wasn't just a guy who you would cross to and he would head it in. He could create. He could do it. He could be fast when he wanted to be. He wasn't a speed guy, but he could be. He was always in the right spot, and he was lethal with his head, which is something that far too few players nowadays have the ability to do like he could.
I mean, with Alan Smith, I
think
humble
and nice and just a nice guy on top of that. And I can only assume he was back then as well. But I mean, just one of the true nice guys of football, Alan Smith. And I had.
You're saying with Giroud, I can see that Giroud was underrated, really, I think. I even underrated him when we had him, I'll be honest with you. But I think Alan Smith was a cleverer footballer.
No, sure.
He was one step ahead all the time. And also, he didn't go looking to have a battle with the centre half. He was clever enough to make a little bit of space for himself. So he didn't get battered the whole time like Giroud did. No, Giroud was a terrific player and still is to a degree. But Alan Smith.
Giroud is a favorite of mine for the way he played and the types of flair that he had and was able to pull off most of the time. In the Emirates era, he is a guy I think was just way underrated. But he was never going to win golden boots like Alan Smith did. But the just the style of not just being a target man, but also being a person who has the ability to create both for himself and for others. Was the analogy there, but now Smudger was, and he was in his absolute prime at that point as well.
Is James again talking about he went to Loftus Road like you did in play Celtic? Eric Larsson, I've got bad memories of him with the European Cup. When he scored against us. What a shame. Now then, talking about Alan Smith, I've got one for you here. I think he got another hat-trick in this game, Norwich. I think he scored 3. We beat him 5-0.
That was the first game back after the break from Hillsborough. And I was not allowed to go to that game because can we take a step back and talk about April 15th?
Go on. Of course.
Because that was the previous game. April 15th, Newcastle 1-0. The game itself was an afterthought because all the games that day were at 3 p.m., including the FA Cup semifinal between Nottingham Forest and Liverpool, played at Sheffield Wednesday's stadium, Hillsborough, which I don't need to explain to anybody what happened that day, but in a football stadium, as that was happening, with the lack of internet and real-time updates, I've always told this story, and I don't know whether I'm making it up or not. And if I am, I apologize. I've just kind of romanticized this into my memory, but I recall that there was a scoreboard at Highbury, but it generally only showed our scores. I don't think it showed out-of-town scores, but I've got this memory that I've created in my head where the scoreboard had the Liverpool-Nottingham Forest game, 0-0, and like the minute number of like 8 or something, and that it just stuck there and didn't change. Again, that probably didn't happen, but it's just, it just, then there's these murmurs around the North Bank terraces.
I remember that. I remember well.
And people start nudging themselves and saying, something's happened up at Hillsborough, and then it's, you start to get some of the wrong things you're being told because, frankly, that's what we were being told. The Liverpool fans are at it again, or there's riots, or and then there's a crush, and there's been a death or two, and it just, as the game went on, it just became this thing where you knew that there was an absolute tragedy, that the game had been suspended, and there was just general minds not necessarily on the game,
Yeah, it sucked all the life out of the game, didn't it? The whole atmosphere got sucked it all out.
Well, people dying will do that to an atmosphere. But yeah, I mean, and so put yourself in my mom's perspective. Again, I'm a 15. Well, at that point, I just turned 16, a few days earlier, and my mom knows that I'm going to watch football at a stadium. She doesn't know anything else really about it. I mean, I think she knows Arsenal, but then the BBC starts breaking into programming and whatever she's watching or listening to, and there's a mass casualty event at a football stadium, and she doesn't know the difference between an FA Cup or first division game or Hillsborough or Highbury or I mean, it's even an H if she knew I was at Highbury.
Yeah.
I mean, like she doesn't know any of that. She can't get in touch with me. I mean, there's no way.
No,
and so I come home after the game, 3:00 game, probably get home around 6:30 or so, 6:15. And she's screaming and crying and like happy, angry, sad, mad.
No.
Like she's just, I mean, for all she knew, I was involved in that. And, and so for the next 2 weeks, it was, look, the stadiums are different. There's a fence at Hillsborough. There's not one it was one of the few Highbury that didn't have a fence. So I'm like, if ever there was something like that, people would just flow under the pitch. I think I even needed to take her to the next game we went to, which was interesting. I'd forgotten that I'd gone with her and my stepfather and and my sister, I think, to a game. But the Norwich one, she just wasn't ready to let me go yet. I think that was the case. Maybe we had something else that I had to do that day, but I was so upset. The 2 home matches that I missed that I was most upset about were Norwich matches. That season and the following season, which
we'll talk about the one the following season as well.
Those 2 I missed for different reasons, and I was gutted to once the results came in. But yeah, I didn't go to that one. But it was certainly, if you watch the '89 movie, you see how we returned and just absolutely picked up where we had left off. But that was a heck of a game. But I was sad at home. I was either punished or just my mom wasn't ready to let me put myself at risk again.
Well, that game against Norwich, I believe a good friend of mine who lives abroad, I managed to get him a ticket next to me, and he was, mad Arsenal supporter. He lives abroad, and he loved it. Obviously, 5-0. But Alan Smith got a hat trick on one. He scored a goal that game, and another goal he got in the Cup Winners' Cup final. Obviously, when we won 1-0. What was the similarity? Do you know what the record is with him?
No, and could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, one of the goals he got against Norwich, and the goal he got against Palmer in the Cup Winners' Cup final. What was so specific against those goals?
I mean, were they visually similar? Because I don't remember the.
Yeah, that's kind of. I'll tell you.
Of near post.
They're the only goals he scored for Arsenal outside the box.
Alan Smith.
Yeah, only 2. A volley from against the Norwich, and obviously the volley he got against Palmer. All the other goals are inside the box.
That blows me away. Is that,
so next time you see it?
I mean, we talk about how Eddie Nketiah you can only be able to score inside the smaller box, like the 6-yard box, but that's incredible.
Yeah. Now
You're going to make me now go back and watch every single game from his entire career.
Just ask him.
I was about to say, or I could just ask him if
he must know that. And then he's going to come back and go, no, your mate's wrong. I scored one against Liverpool. Anyway, no, ask him. Right. Now we're going to come to the crux. Oh, no, before we do that, sorry. My first mental test, if Arsenal could win the league that season, was in January. We played away to Everton. And like now, Mike, we weren't very good away to Everton, no matter where we were in the league or they were in the league. And we beat them easily 3-1. And that day, I'll never forget, I thought, you know what? We've got half a chance here. I think we're going to do it.
Did Kevin Richardson celebrate that day? Did he celebrate?
He scored, but he used to play for Everton.
Right. So did he celebrate?
I don't think. No, I don't think he went berserk. He might have run a bit. I think they all went
I don't
around.
think he went berserk normally when he scored.
Don't worry about that. Now then, we it looked like we were going to win the league. We overtook Liverpool. We had momentum, and we had 2 home games, as you know, on the trot. Home to Derby and home to Wimbledon, and we only managed 1 point out of 6. And I thought, 99.9% of Arsenal supporters went, "That's it, end of. We've had our chance." We weren't knocking on the door.
I think 199% of Arsenal supporters thought that at that point. I mean,
Mike, we weren't. If we were knocking on the door every year, and you go, "Oh, what a shame we've missed it," but this was our chance. A bit like this year to a degree.
I was going to say, if we ever got around to talking about the similarities, because I mean, there are so many similarities between 86 to 89 and 2000 to 2023. I wrote an article about it for Gunnerstown. It was my first blog I ever wrote, which was a few months ago for Gunnerstown, about, you know, the special season for a team. And the whole point of the blog was that it kind of seemed like it was describing this team and Arteta and the players, but it wasn't. It was describing 88, 89 and the preambles to that as well. But yeah, I mean, those 2 games, I was at both of those games. I was gutted at both of those games. I thought we had blown it completely. And I will never forget Peter Shilton at, like, he's our age at the time. Just, the guy was standing on his head, keeping shots from going into that North Bank goal. We were there getting ready to celebrate, getting a point or possibly winning the game, and it just didn't happen because of what he was doing. It was insane.
Colin here says we won our last 3 visits. I don't remember that. You're probably right, but I don't. I mean, they were a good team then, Everton as well. They're a terrific team. I don't remember that. I know that I wasn't very confident in the Everton game. And Everton, what's he say? This guy says Everton applaud us off the pitch. We were that good. And funnily enough, I went out to eat, my wife and with a friend of mine who's a Spurs supporter, and even he was getting jitters. So I knew that we're onto something on that Everton win. I thought we had a chance. He thought we had a chance as well. As you say, lots of similarities. You know, we got 1 point and we didn't fancy it, and then we don't have to go through the game again. We've all been there, seen it, done it, got the T-shirts, as they say. It was something that I'll never forget. None of us will forget. I mean, if I ever forget that, then I don't think I remember my name. But it was.
So did you? I mean, did you go? Did you watch it on television?
Watch it on telly. It was the first Friday night game.
Yeah.
Live on television, and that was I think someone's told me that's when Sky wanted to get involved. They realised when the whole nation was watching this that this is sexy. This was really sexy.
But you know what's not sexy is like Everton versus West Ham on a Friday night. But like but yes, this was a big memory for me. And, you know, we watched it from a pub that it's called the British Flag, and it was in St. John's Wood, not far from Lord's Cricket Ground. It's no longer a pub; it's now an educational facility, I think, for Islamic youth. And but I know exactly where it was. We passed right by it a couple of weeks ago when I was over, and we used to go there a lot, both allowed to and mostly not allowed to by our parents. But there was a pool table there. There was a jukebox. Some guy there was a Liverpool fan and always used to play just constantly over and over again, Ferry Cross the Mersey in that to the point where I actually didn't mind the song so much except for what it represented. And they brought a TV out that night and put it next to the bar, and a bunch of us watched it. Not all of us Arsenal fans, but we all just went that night, got there early, drank a lot. I remember getting an argument with my girlfriend at the time over something, and then the game was on. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm going back to watch this. This is important to me. And you know, by the end of the game, I was on the floor in a dog pile of random men wearing yellow and red. Just, I mean, on the face down on the floor of a pub at 16 years old, and I loved it. It was the best thing ever in the history.
Does it get any better than that? I was at home, and when Thomas went through, I was basically, my world went into slow motion. I slowly got out, like the film. I was seriously,
Right.
it was a bit like the film, Mike. I
Yeah.
was slowly getting up from my sofa, and I was thinking to myself, if you miss this, I'll never watch football again. I wouldn't be able to take it.
How did you handle the one from 10 minutes earlier where he shot it right at Grobbelaar?
But you knew this was the last one. This was
Yeah.
I thought this one was easier, actually. I thought this one. And when it went in, I let out a scream, and my wife came in the room. The baby's upstairs. I said, but we've scored. I could, no interest. And I went to Highbury that night.
We could have another baby. It's not a big deal. We could, or the baby could sleep, tomorrow. Maybe that's not having another baby would not have been a good reason, but. So was that Jerome?
I would call him Mickey, wouldn't I? Whoever the sex of the baby called him Mickey.
You absolutely should.
Anyway, so that was that. We're going to just flick through the next season because that season was great, but the next season wasn't so great.
Just a hangover. It's an absolute hangover of a season.
You were saying United weren't that good, Mike, and you're probably right, but we had them first game of the season at Old Trafford. They trounced us 4-1. We are the champions, but they trounced us 4-1. And that was the famous game when a guy called Michael Knighton went on the pitch and started heading the ball up. He was going to take over United, agreed for £30 million. I don't know if you remember. I don't know if you. You're over here, obviously. Do you remember that?
No, I don't. I more than likely might not have been back to London from spending the summer in the States with my dad at that point. I think because school would have started in early September, so I probably got back late September, missed the beginning handful of games in that.
This was on all the channels over here. Not that many channels.
Well, right, but I was in Virginia, where I can assure you that the English First Division was not being televised.
Yeah, well, that's fact. But he was going to take over United. They'd agreed 30 million. I don't think he could have raised the money. Now we came fourth in the league that year. We scored 73 goals the year we won it. This year I think we scored 54 goals. Hell of a lot less, 20 goals less. Yeah. And our highest goal scorer again was Alan Smith. He only scored 10. So it was we got knocked out of the cups early. We played Liverpool at home that season. The crowd was 33,000. The champions elect and the champions, 33,000. It's like madness. It's baggy trousers. It really is.
I mean, you even red members could get tickets to that game.
I mean, I used to have people knock on my door. Do you want to go today, Melvyn? That's all right. I got a ticket, thanks. Right, the game you mentioned, Mike, that you didn't go to, boo-hoo, was at Norwich again. We beat them 4-3. Yeah. What a game that was.
Oh, now that game, there was something going on that day that caused me to not be able to go. And believe me, I wasn't happy about it.
You must have been getting married that day, Mike. Nothing else would have kept you away.
At 16, sure, I would have loved that. But no, I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't something that I wanted to do, and so I was a little annoyed that I didn't go. And then when I saw, I guess, match of the day that night, and saw A, how many goals were scored, and B, the absolute, won't even call it handbags at the end, but just there was just a brawl at the end that. That was one of the first. I think it was the first time that teams were fined for the actions of their players. I think I read that recently. We were fined £20,000, and Norwich was fined 50 because because of course they were the dicks of the situation. But I just because it all happened. It all went down on the North Bank too. So I'm like, fun game, lots of goals. B, we won. C, fisticuffs right in front of where I would have normally been, and I was gutted to have missed that game. No, not a big deal in the grand scheme of the season. We 4-3.
We were getting beat as well. I think we were 2 or 3 down at one stage.
I think they went up 2-0 before. I actually don't think we scored a goal in the first half. I think we got them all in the second half and kind of came back. And Norwich lost their cool. And
who did lose his cool? I remember, which he never used to lose his cool, was David O'Leary.
Yeah.
He lost it big time, which is unusual for him. And it was his record game for us, 622nd game.
And he scored he scored the winner. I think we were
score the
winning.
winner?
I think
a penalty. I know it was a penalty, wasn't it? Last minute penalty.
Dixon scored a penalty.
Ah,
and,
right.
I mean, to be clear, I'm looking at it now, but I only see 3 goals accounted for. So maybe I think Sherwood scored in the 76th to make it 3-3, and then I think O'Leary scored the winner in the 78th. But there's something missing there. But it's just that was one of those games that, for no other reason than the fact that I missed it and there was a big brawl, that I'll always remember that result and the season that it happened. Because honestly, there wasn't a great deal of other enthralling stuff that happened that season.
Not at all. It was after the Lord Mayor show, as they say.
Yeah, most of the spring. Most of the spring was the football season equivalent of a dead rubber. So.
2-0 down and then 3. Oh, right, and then 3-2. Gotcha. Thanks, Ben. He's got, bloody hell, that Ben. I want him on my team. I want this Ben on my team, my quiz team. Definitely. Right, what we're going to do now, look at a couple of programs before we go. Let's see if I can find them. Just very quickly run through these. How things change. That's the man, David O'Leary. That's against Liverpool. And look at this is the 88-19, the team this is the home game, so I'll make that bigger. I can read the teams. They had Mike Hooper in goal. He wasn't really their first choice, I don't think. Gary Ablett, Barry Venison, Steve Nicol, Ronnie Wheeler.
I hated Bruce Grobbelaar, so I just there were so many guys on that team that I mean, in the context of how I could have felt about somebody at the time without knowing them, I absolutely hated them. Ian Rush being the worst of them. I couldn't stand that guy. He scored every time I saw Liverpool play. Ian Rush.
Yeah. Ray Houghton, he was a good footballer. Steve McMahon. McMahon. He was the 1 minute man at Anfield that season. John Aldrich. But look at this. I don't know if you can see it from where you are, Mark. I've made it larger on my screen. There was a match ball sponsor Arsenal had. At the bottom right. It's unbelievable.
Levi Jerem.
Sponsor.
Levi Jerem.
Levi Jerem.
Let's do let's take the first answer. What religion do you think that guy was?
Well, no, I think he's Scottish. I don't know about religion. I think.
Okay. So it's not Levi. Well, just sounds like a Jewish kind of name.
And also, what they've done as well, which they used to do, Arsenal. There's all about the officials, and it's talking about the referee. I think that's why we had better decisions against us. Then we showed the ref a lot of respect before the game. I think we should do that again. I
think they need to show us a little bit of respect before, during, and after the game. But that's just my opinion.
That's another story. Yeah, I'll just pick out a few more. Let's have a look. Now this is weird as well. That's what I picked this one out for. It's the Villa action game. This is a game we played against Villa, and this is why are the photographs in black and white? They were coloured then in programs. I mean, did someone leave a filter off or something, or the lens didn't have the right lens? I was shocked. All the other ones are in colour, apart from this one.
That is a little strange. Maybe they were trying to be artistic.
I don't think so. But I don't think so. Not Arsenal. Not then.
Well, and that was before the days of Stu McFarlane as well. So, here we got.
You must have read this all the time.
I skim through stuff now normally, but I had nothing better to do for an hour and a half. So I would read all of these things. I saw the reserve scores. I would see like the junior gunners program and
brings it all back, eh?
Yeah.
This is what's interesting as well, is they're advertising in the program jobs to work for the Arsenal. You wouldn't have to do that now, would you?
No, I mean, it's crazy. There's a website that advertises for jobs for Arsenal now. And,
is that right?
Yeah, I mean, they're few and far between, but absolutely they, there's, like, I forget what it's called, but it's work with, it's not like workwitharsenal.co.uk or anything, but there's something like that. Think about how many more jobs there are at Arsenal than there were in 1988, 89. Oh, here we got we got pricing information here.
Yeah.
I want to say that the programs were 95p, and the tickets themselves were £3 or £4. That's I mean I
They're a bit
certainly
more than that. They're a bit more than that. Match day prices 8, 9. If you're in the best blocks, I think it says £11.
but for the North Bank terraces for
Oh,
standing,
no, sorry. This is the East Upper and all that. Sorry.
yeah, because I mean I used to walk up, basically pull a few pound coins out of my pocket, maybe it was like $3.85 or something like that, and
I've got here, Mike. What a season ticket.
I might have been a concession as well because I was under 18. So,
well, for ordinary, for a normal season ticket to stand for the season, £91.
So,
£3-4.
19. Yeah. I mean, I certainly didn't purchase them in that way. I would just buy them at the turnstile, but
yeah,
which is, I mean, imagine doing that now. There was the closest thing to that is while I was in London a couple of weeks ago, I was told a story by a friend. It was the day before, or it was United was on the Sunday, and it was in the Friday in the Armory gift shop, and he was walking up to purchase clothing and gear and stuff, and he says, shockingly, an out-of-town tourist came up and said, "Can I get this scarf? And I'd like 2 for Sunday, please." This was on Friday at the Armory gift shop. Like, I mean, you almost had to feel for the guy in the sense that, he was stuck out of the 1980s and not necessarily understanding what tickets are like at the moment. But he said like the guy at the till and him just had this look of like they were like rolling their eyes and trying not to laugh out loud at the guy. But you used to be able to do that.
Of course you could.
You'd walk right up and hand the guy a $5, get some change.
That's right.
You were there to see the Arsenal.
When I was 6 or 7, my father and my uncle, who used to take me, used to jib me over the top of the turnstile because I used to sit on their lap to give the guy half a crown or whatever it was, and that's how it all started. Now, this is what you were talking about. This is from the Norwich program.
Yeah. See, I wouldn't have had this program because I was forbidden to go to the game.
This is what they did.
Yeah.
Talking about the disaster. So you bang on what you said. Absolutely.
I have the program from the Newcastle game, but it's, obviously the program for that game is unremarkable because it hadn't happened yet. But so, yeah, that would have been an interesting one to have.
Now, this is an interesting thing as well, going a bit more light-hearted, obviously. This is advertising Adidas. Are they those two guys know each other? I don't know. They look the same to me.
What I love about and I don't know whether they still do this or not, but what I loved about those programs was they had a centerfold. I mean, they would have a different centerfold every week. It would be Alan Smith, or it would be Lee Dixon, and there was relatively little nudity. But other than the short shorts, but like
if you like some thighs, you're all right.
If you like some man thigh, then you could see your favorite Arsenal players.
But
upper
they're
thigh.
not even Arsenal players, Mike. Why didn't they think about?
These are.
Where can we get a guy, 24, 5-year-old at the club? Where can we actually find a couple of guys? Nah, don't know where we could look. We better get people from outside. We never find any men about 24.
Adidas probably said no. We need models because who's going to buy clothes just because they're worn by a footballer? Who would do that?
Yeah. You won't, never catch on, will it? Never catch on. There's one I want to show you as well. This is quite funny. Hold on. I can find it. Come on, Melvyn. Come on. Get rid of that one. Don't say I didn't put it on.
Come on, Melvyn.
One more look.
Come on, Melvyn.
Come on, Melvyn. If I didn't put it on, I'll be very upset. Oh, no, I've got it. I found it. Here we are.
So you were into the advertisements, clearly.
Yeah. I mean, George Graham wearing an aquascutum coat. Look at that. He does look the part, doesn't he?
He's a dapper man. He was at the time. Yeah. He had style. He was gruff, and he was demanding, and he wasn't everybody's best friend, but the guy could dress. I mean, except for when he was in like those club warm-up shirts, like the outfit that they all wore, the coaches and stuff at Anfield in '89. I mean, it's, you either love it or you hate it. It was very, very, very 1980s. It wasn't going to make people go crazy and jump onto Arsenal Direct and buy it. But
in fairness, Mike, that wouldn't look out of place now, would it?
I mean, in the sense that people do dig the retro stuff now, but I don't know. It's my favorite part of watching of the '89 film is just seeing everyone crawl out of the Anfield dugouts wearing those yellow and blue.
Oh yeah,
wavy,
iconic, isn't it? Iconic scene that.
Yeah.
And you see, Kevin Campbell was there, wasn't he? He was climbing out as well, Kevin Campbell.
Well, he says, I think the story he tells is that he was in the crowd for the majority of the game, and frankly, I was just listening to Paul Davis's book, and he was also he was not in the dugout or in the side that day, and he was in the crowd, and they were towards the end of the game when the goal was being scored, they were walking around the pitch into the dugout area, and then all hell broke loose. So their vantage point is one to hear about. But yeah, I mean that scene. I mean, I didn't see really any of it because I was still covered by about 7 men on the floor of a pub. I think it took about half an hour to unpile that, but it was, that was a night to remember. And to me, the whole next season was a free pass. I know it might not have felt that way to everybody, but it was a free pass. And frankly, when I left to go back to the States right after the World Cup in 1990 and before the following season, I had assumed that Arsenal had just pulled a one-off. And this can transition you into your next show, but I had assumed it was a one-off. I went back to the States, very quickly lost sight and lost track of the football club because there was no televising. There is no CFAX. All you would get is a 1 to 2 day delayed one-line result in the 9th page of the sports section in the newspaper, if you were lucky. And I did see a number of wins that following season. And then, of course, came back to visit my friends who were still over in December and learned how the season was going. But, I didn't realize that it was the start of something special. I thought it was just a unique, special year. And, the following year kind of proved that to be the case to me at the time. Little did I know what was to come.
Exactly. Don't, again, spoiler alert, all right, please. We've got a few people here coming on and saying how the scoring went against Norwich. You've got Ben giving it that. It's like a tennis game, isn't it, that?
Yeah.
We've got Richard giving it that. So, and we've got Colin. Colin reckons we were 2-0 down. So
I think Richard's got it right. I think we tied it up, and then they went ahead again. Then we tied it up and went ahead at the end with the with O'Leary's goal. I think was the last one.
It was the game. We said that, Colin. It was his game when he beat the Imperials. Right. Just a couple of things that happened in '89. I'm not going to do all this. I normally do the middle season here. Tiananmen Square in China happened. You remember that, obviously.
Yeah.
That was horrible.
I mean, the one thing I remember watching from my television in England happened that year as well, which I'm sure you're mentioning it next, in Berlin.
Yeah, the Cold War ended when the wall came down. That was a big thing. Anything else? Sky TV was launched in the UK. No, I remember some. I mean, I have vivid memories of watching some pretty darn historical events while I was in England, and the two you've mentioned were both in there. But Mandela being freed from prison after some decades, I'll never forget that. I watched that from that must have been in 1989, 90 maybe even, because I watched that. We lived in two different places in London, and I watched that in the second place. And then that World Cup that summer of '90. That was my last 3 weeks or 4 weeks in town coincided
with the World Cup. School was already out.
Hold on, was that Italia 90?
That was the Italia 90 where England made it to the semifinals and left in heartbreaking penalty kick fashion to the West Germans. But I still look at that. Most people look at that as being one of the most boring World Cups ever. I look at that as being the best World Cup ever. So. Well, just because there weren't a lot of goals scored. There was a lot of 0-0s and 1-0s in the early stages, but the knockout stages of that tournament were.
Was that Argentina played Germany in the final? Yeah. Argentina had 2 men sent off.
I think so. Yeah, Argentina. That was the year they lost their first. Very similar to this season, this World Cup. They lost their first game. In that one, it was to Cameroon with Roger Milla, like the 39-year-old
dancing around the corner flag, and then Cameroon played. I think I became an England supporter because of that World Cup, and I remain an England supporter because of that World Cup, despite how hard it has been in recent years to root for some of the England players, which I'm glad to see finally changing as well. But people always ask me why I have a 3 Lions shirt and why I support England in every game, excluding the 2 World Cup games that they played against the U.S., where I've actually rooted for a draw and gotten it. But it's just because of that World Cup. There was just something special going on. The David Platt's goal against Belgium in the 119th minute. That was the one I watched in a pub, and the celebrations after that went in were unbelievable. Didn't realize at the time he'd become an Arsenal player. And then we played. I think we played Cameroon after that, and then West Germany. Nearly got beat against Cameroon. Nearly got beat.
Yeah, no, the Cameroon.
That was a scare.
It was a huge scare. And then the West Germany goal with a deflected goal and a penalty.
Up in the air.
I hated those guys, and it killed me that we lost that game. That was, part of England's general lack of good fortune against West German and German teams. But those 2 years were pretty big years, and for me to spend them in London, and I was supposed to spend a third, which would have been 90-91, and then I would have graduated from high school and gone back to college in the States. But the family situation with my mother and stepfather was apparently not doing well enough to support us being in London for another year. So, which I didn't know at the time and found out later. So we came home. They split up. I lost track of Arsenal for quite some time, and it wasn't until the mid 2000s that I kind of rediscovered and had the access to Arsenal that I once had. But so some people say, well, you really started being an Arsenal supporter in 2006, and I said, no, I started in 1988. I never stopped. I just, I wasn't.
When you went back in 1990, Mike, when did you then come back to England again?
Well, for a short-term visit, I came back over Christmas of 1990-91.
But to stay for a period of time.
Oh, the next. Well, I've never stayed for 6 months, even though it might seem like it. But I came back once with my wife for a few days in 2000, and then the next time after that, we brought our family, which at that point they were 10 and 12 years old, in 2013, and my first Arsenal game back in London, which now of course was at the Emirates, was a game that I believe it was against either Reading or Sunderland, but it was Rocky Rocastle Day. It was right after the March international break, and so it was actually quite emotional for me because over the years I had learned about what had happened with Rocky. My favorite player, the one who I was fortunate enough to see play in his prime, and then to find out later that he had such an unfortunate experience with his health and passing away way too early. It just gutted me. And then, so for my first game back to randomly, because it was during my kids' spring break from school, to randomly be the end of March game that everyone chanted in the 7th minute, and that was a nice return, and it's been. And my wife said something to me she may regret. I think she regrets it, but not in an awful way. She saw how I was in those moments on that trip and says, you're in a position to come back a little more often. You should do it. And I took that to heart, I think.
Well, she gets you, Mike. Let's put it that way. She obviously gets you.
I think it was one of those things where you tell someone.
Thing for her to say, actually.
Well, it was, but I think if she realized how seriously I would take it, she might not have said it. But yeah, I love coming back, and it just really all goes back to a point. Not to get too sappy, but until I was 15 or 16 and had this experience in London, a large portion of it was which was shaped by Arsenal. I just wasn't the person that I ended up becoming. I didn't like the person I was then. I was kind of a frustrated kid of divorce and didn't enjoy things. And finally, I found some new things to kind of make myself about and to take up my time and my energy. And it spun me into a self-sustaining ability to, just be a better person and a happier person. And so my constant desire to get back and to enjoy and to relive and those sort of things comes from the 2 years that we've talked about. And while it wasn't all about Arsenal, I did have a life outside of that, and a lot of that was influential as well. It's a time in my life that I'm very, very close to, and so I couldn't be more thrilled to now have friends like yourself and people who I can go over now and see without necessarily having to bring people to spend time with, family and friends. And I'm going to be over a lot more in the coming years as well.
It's fantastic meeting you as well. I remember the first time we actually met.
I probably don't.
No, I'll tell you what it was. I was queuing up to get in, and we had the barrier, as they do now, and you were walking past me. And I didn't know if you knew me or anything. Why should you know me? I went, Mike, like
Where
that. You turned around.
At the Emirates or at the Tollington?
Emirates.
Oh, okay.
The Emirates. I went, Mike, just like spontaneous. It's Melvyn, isn't it? I went, yeah, well, he knows my name. He knows my name. I've made it. That's it.
Look, you deserve for way more people to know your name.
So many times I've met you, it's been fantastic. I mean that genuinely. It's like I've known you for 100 years, and I'm only 99. But it's like I've known you for so long. It's fabulous.
It feels like that. You're the older brother that and there are a few people that I've felt this way about, that, you're bridges to the past of Arsenal, but you're still incredibly active and vibrant in the current stage. You can have a conversation that's respectful without being condescending. You welcome all. And we need those people. Dave Faber was I considered my Arsenal father, because you would want to, Goonerholic, was his handle, and he wrote blogs. But Dave Faber is a man who I learned very quickly is someone who you sit at his knee and learn about Arsenal, not the history of Arsenal, not the stuff that you can see on here and read about, but the lifestyle. And there are, quite fortunately, a lot of those people. But when we lose them, it's going to come down to the next generation. But again, you don't pursue a conflict-based, argument-based, publicity-based thing. You like to talk to people about things that you both remember, and I think that's so valuable. Whether 5 people are watching it or 5,000 people are watching it, it's really food for the soul, and it gives you perspective. It gives you perspective about life, about Arsenal, about sport, about everything, and so I can't tell you how much I respect you and enjoy spending time and talking with you.
No, thanks, Mike. Thanks for that, and vice versa. I love speaking to you. You know that. But the funny thing is that every person I've had on here, everyone has said something to me that you wouldn't not be able to read in a book or in the internet. It's their own personal little story, and you think, wow, that's fantastic. Because I've had a few, obviously, but I've heard my own ones. I want to hear other people's as well, and it's just one or two people after we've done it was actually very, very emotional. So it just brings it all back to me. I'm not going to give the clue why, because someone might be like, well, this guy was very, and I was touched as well. He says it just brings it all back. He said, just talking about a long time ago, Melvyn, I haven't, though it's in my brain, I haven't thought about it. And now it just all of a sudden it rehashes everything, and you realise what it's all about. So it's fantastic.
Well, when I lived through that era, I lived through something very special, but I lived through it in a vacuum where only a couple of people lived through it with me. So, and I took that with me as kind of a me only thing right up through almost 7 or 8 years of kind of being into Arsenal and watching every game at the States. It was a solitary endeavor. And it's unfortunate when it's that way because you don't get to share it with people. But when I first discovered supporters clubs over here in 2014 in the States, I realized there were other people who were Arsenal fans, and they weren't people who I needed to go and tell how special I was because I was there in 88, 89. There were people who had their own backstories, their own reasons, people whose cousins sent them video cassettes from Ethiopia of the Arsenal, and that's why they got into the Arsenal. And then when all of a sudden the games started coming on in 2005 and 2006, they started watching and congregated pubs. And I just spent a weekend at Gooner Gras in New Orleans, which is the 9th annual. It's just a festival of Arsenal supporters from all over the country, including all over the world, including a friend of ours who's a huge Gooner, loves to watch podcasts. He's from Stoke. But he's a huge Gooner and came all the way to New Orleans to meet new people and talk and live the Arsenal lifestyle. And it is now the opposite of me either suffering through or enjoying through this alone, or just me and my son or something like that. The more the merrier. And that's why, the social element of Arsenal support, can pick you up when the on the pitch element of it is down. Or it can even enhance the feeling when it's good, but I just couldn't recommend it enough. And again, that's why my favorite place to be in the world. It's not a beach in Saint-Tropez. It's not a ski resort on the Alps. It is the front deck of the Tollington on game day. And if you've ever seen me there, I generally look pretty happy, if not intoxicated or both. And it's because the people just come in and come out, and there's hugs, and that's what I love most about Arsenal. If we win the league this season, that's going to be amazing. But if we don't, I still have the companionship, and that's what brings us together. And I truly believe, despite all the indications that that I'm biased on this, I don't know that every single fan club has that, or that every single club's fan base is what I meant to say, not fan club.
Yeah.
Every single club's fan base has that. I don't think so. And Mark C in the chat, I have been to the Yucca Tap in Tempe, Arizona. They get a ton of people for games, and there are pubs like that in every major and a lot of minor cities all over the U.S. and all over the world.
As you say, the best fan. Yeah. Oh, right. Fantastic.
It's a good one. There are a lot of them.
Amazing. I mean, the Tollington is a. I'm not a drinker, as you know, but I love going there.
I'm not either. But we had some good times at the Tollington a couple of weeks ago.
We did, yes.
Thanks to what was his name, Michael Elise, or
yeah, classic, absolute classic.
Oh,
well, I want to thank you very, very much. Normally, I keep it at 60 minutes, but
it's impossible with me because whatever your agenda is, I'm going to keep talking. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you having me on. I'm
glad you came on. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for coming on, and thank you for being you. Hopefully, you'll come over soon. You will be coming over soon. I'll be looking forward to seeing you when you do come over. So that'd be great. Looking forward to that.
I'll be back at some point in the next 3 months, and then of course I'll be back for the parade. Do
you want to just? I know we haven't got a great following, but I think it's good for whoever listens. Tell me what you do with the Gooners, the cancer thing you do, which is fantastic. Please.
Well, thank you. No, I appreciate that. I'm always happy to talk about it. We have a charity called Gooners v Cancer. The website, which is transitioning to this year's version of it, but it's goonersvcancer.com. the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Gooners v Cancer. And we raise money for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, which helps to try to find the cure and support families who are currently dealing with these illnesses, which is how I lost my father and how so many people I've met in the community and in every community have, lost family members or struggled with it. It's an awful condition. And all we're trying to do is utilize the generosity and the companionship and the word of mouth of our Gooner family, our podcasts, our whatever, relationships with people, and just all kind of come together for a common cause. And so far, over the last 5 years, we've raised just under $92,000, so probably about 75,000 pounds for the charity. And we're, we never stop. So follow us on our socials, and you'll be seeing updates about great giveaways that we have, auctions, raffles, tournaments. Everything that we do to raise money also involves having fun or having a chance to win something, a prize or an experience that has to do with Arsenal. So come and check it out. And thanks for letting me chat about it.
No, fantastic. It really is a good thing. Really is a good thing, Mike. Well, thanks very much again. I'll be speaking to you soon, hopefully, and hopefully seeing you soon.
Absolutely.
Come on, you Arsenal. Let's do it. Cheers, Mike. Speak to you soon.